Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, staring at the stars through the large window of the space station. The coffee in his cup had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't notice. Being in charge of Earth's orbital defense was usually boring work. Most days, nothing happened except routine patrols and supply runs. The alarm changed everything. Red lights flashed across the command center as every screen lit up with warnings. Jake jumped from his chair, spilling the cold coffee across his uniform. His crew of 12 rushed to their stations, fingers flying over keyboards and controls. "What's going on?" Jake shouted over the noise. Lieutenant Amy Foster looked up from her console, her face pale. "Sir, we're getting a transmission, but it's impossible." "What do you mean impossible?" Amy's hands shook as she worked. "It's coming through every communication system we have. It's radio, quantum link, even the old emergency channels. Whatever is sending this signal is using technology we don't understand." Jake moved to stand behind her. "Can you put it on the main screen?" "I'm trying, sir. The signal keeps changing. It's like whoever's sending it is desperate to make sure we hear it." The main screen flickered and filled with static. Then, slowly, an image began to form. Jake had seen many alien species since Earth joined the galactic community 5 years ago, but this was different. The being on the screen looked like it was made of crystal. Its body was tall and thin, with light flowing through it like water. Through glass. "Please," the alien said, its voice high and musical. "If anyone can hear this message, please help us." Jake felt his stomach drop. In all his years in the military, he'd never heard such fear in anyone's voice. The alien continued, "My name is Elder Zixtala of the Cathara people. We live in the Andromeda sector, far from your worlds. We are a peaceful people. We have never hurt anyone. We only want to live in peace and share knowledge with others." The image flickered, showing scenes of destruction. Beautiful crystal cities lay in ruins. Massive ships with dark metal hulls fired weapons that turned entire planets into dust. But something terrible has come to our space. They call themselves the Devourers. They are machines, not living beings. They eat entire star systems. They take everything and leave nothing behind. Jake watched in horror as the images showed world after world being destroyed. Billions of crystal beings like Elder Zixtala were running for their lives. "We have asked every species in the galaxy for help," the Elder continued. "The Zilani said we were not worth saving. The Viridians said the cost was too high. The Kraken said fighting the Devourers would only bring death to their own people. 300 of our worlds are gone. We have nowhere left to run." Captain Lisa Hayes, Earth's chief alien expert, had arrived and was standing next to Jake. She was writing down everything the alien said, her pen moving fast across the paper. "We know of the humans from the death world called Earth," Elder Zixtala said. "Stories reach even our distant space. They say your people are different. They say you come from a world so dangerous that it made you strong in ways others cannot understand. They say you do things that other species think are impossible." Jake looked around the command center. His crew was listening to every word. Some looked scared, others looked angry. All of them looked ready to act. "We have nowhere else to turn," the Elder said, its crystal body dimming with sadness. "If there is any kindness in your hearts, if there is any strength in your people, please help us. We are dying. Our children are dying. Soon, there will be no Cathara left in the universe." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence. Jake stood there for a long moment, thinking. Earth had only been part of the galactic community for 5 years. Their ships were smaller than most alien vessels. Their weapons were simple compared to what other species had. By all logic, humans had no business getting involved in a war against an enemy that had defeated every other species. "Sir," Amy said quietly, "what do we do?" Before Jake could answer, Admiral Ben Parker's voice came through the communication system. "All station commanders report to the main conference room immediately. We have a situation." 20 minutes later, Jake sat in a room with 15 other military leaders. Admiral Parker stood at the front, his gray hair and lined face showing the weight of command. Behind him, the alien's message played again on the large screen. "Been in contact with Earth's command," Admiral Parker said when the message ended. "Every government on Earth has seen this transmission. They're all asking the same question. What do we do?" Captain Ryan Cole, commander of the heavy cruiser Valor, spoke first. "Sir, this isn't our fight. Barely have enough ships to protect our own space. The Devourers have destroyed hundreds of worlds. What could we possibly do against them?" "Ryan's right," said Captain Susan Miller. "Species with better technology than ours won't fight these things. What chance do we have?" Dr. Lisa Hayes stood up. "We can't just ignore this. We're talking about genocide. An entire species is being wiped out. And if we get involved, the same thing could happen to us," Ryan shot back. The argument continued for an hour. Some wanted to help, others said it was suicide. Jake listened to it all, but his mind kept going back to the alien's words, the fear in its voice, the images of those crystal cities being destroyed. Finally, Admiral Parker called for quiet. "Jake, you haven't said anything. What's your opinion?" Jake stood up slowly. The room fell silent as everyone looked at him. He thought about his daughter. Back on Earth, he thought about all the human colonies scattered across space. He thought about what it would be like if Earth received a message like the one they had just heard, begging for help while the rest of the galaxy turned away. "I think," Jake said quietly, "that this is exactly why humans are different from everyone else." He looked around the room at the faces of his fellow officers. Every other species in the galaxy heard that message and decided it was too dangerous to help. They calculated the odds and walked away. But that's not what humans do. Jake's voice grew stronger. We're the species that sailed across unknown oceans when everyone said we'd fall off the edge of the world. We're the species that went to the moon because someone said it was impossible. We're the species that kept fighting even when the odds were against us. He paused, looking each person in the eye. "If no one else will answer their call for help, then we will, because that's what humans do. We show up when others won't. We fight when others give up. We answer the call." The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Dr. Hayes started clapping. Captain Miller joined her, then others, until the whole room was applauding. Admiral Parker smiled for the first time that day. "Well then, I guess we have a war to prepare for." Jake felt a mix of fear and excitement run through him. They were about to do something that every other species in the galaxy thought was impossible. They were going to answer a desperate call for help from beings they had never met, against an enemy they knew nothing about. It was exactly the kind of thing humans were known for. The news spread across human space faster than light. Within 6 hours of Admiral Parker's decision, every human colony, every space station, and every ship in the void knew about the Cathara and their desperate plea for help. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Captain Nick Turner was eating dinner in his quarters aboard the heavy cruiser Defiant when the message came through. He read it twice, then set down his fork and walked to the bridge. His crew of 200 was already waiting for him. "Sir," said his first officer, Lieutenant Commander Kate Roberts, "we've received orders to report to Earth for immediate deployment." Looked around at his crew. These were good people, brave people. But what they were about to do would test them in ways they had never been tested before. "I won't lie to you," Nick said. "This mission is dangerous. We're going up against an enemy that has destroyed hundreds of worlds. Anyone who wants to transfer to another assignment can do so with no questions asked." Not a single person moved. Kate smiled. "Sir, the crew has already voted. We're all in." The same scene played out on ships across human space. Captain Dan Miller commanded a simple cargo freighter called Lucky Star. His ship carried food and supplies between colonies. It had no weapons and barely any shields. When he heard about the mission, he immediately contacted the nearest military base. "I know my ship isn't much," Dan told Commander Patricia Lee over the communication link, "but I can carry supplies, medical equipment, whatever you need. Just tell me where to go." Within 3 days, Dan had installed basic weapons on his freighter. They weren't much, but they were something. His wife, engineer Sophie Baker, worked day and night to upgrade the ship's engines and shields. "You know this is crazy, right?" Sophie said as she worked under the ship's control panel. Dan smiled. "Crazy is what humans do best." The response wasn't just military. Dr. Amy Foster led a team of scientists working on new shield technology. They had been trying to solve the problem for years, but suddenly they had a deadline. War was coming. The aliens' technology is based on energy absorption, Amy explained to her team. If we can create shields that reflect instead of absorb, we might have a chance. Her assistant, Dr. Helen Gray, looked up from her computer. Amy, we're talking about rewriting the basic principles of shield technology. We have maybe 2 weeks, then we'd better work fast. The civilian response was just as strong. Major Alex Stone commanded the 3rd Marine Division on Mars. When he put out a call for volunteers, expected maybe 1,000 responses. Instead, he got 50,000. Men and women from every walk of life wanted to join the fight. I'm a teacher, said one volunteer, a woman named Emma Clark. But my brother is in the Navy. If humans are going to war, I want to help. Alex looked at the long line of volunteers. Ma'am, this isn't going to be like the movies. It's going to be real combat against an enemy we don't understand. Emma's jaw set with determination. Sir, my great-grandmother fought in World War III. My grandmother served in the colony wars. Fighting impossible odds is what my family does. Not everyone was supportive. The Galactic Council sent a representative to Earth to try to talk the humans out of their plan. High Minister Vexstar was a Zilani, one of the oldest and most advanced species in the galaxy. He arrived in a ship that was 3 times larger than anything humans had built. Admiral Parker met him at the orbital station. Vexstar was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large black eyes. His voice was cold and emotionless. Admiral Parker, Vexstar said, I come to prevent your species from making a terrible mistake. What mistake is that? Parker asked. Cannot defeat the Devourers. They have technology that is thousands of years ahead of yours. Your ships are primitive. Your weapons are weak. Your shields are barely functional. Parker nodded. You're probably right. Vexstar seemed surprised by the agreement. Then why do you persist with this foolish plan? Because someone has to try. The Cathara are not your responsibility. There. Fate is not your concern. Parker stood up, his face showing anger for the first time. Minister, let me explain something about humans. We don't help people because it's smart or safe or profitable. We help people because it's right. Dr. Lisa Hayes, who had been silent during the meeting, finally spoke. Minister, may I ask you a question? Vexstar nodded. How many species asked you for help before the Cathara? I do not understand the relevance of that question, because I think you do understand. I think other species have asked for help against the Devourers, and you turn them all away, just like you're turning away the Cathara now. Vexstar is black. Eyes seem to grow even darker. We make decisions based on logic and survival. Emotion leads to extinction. Lisa smiled. Maybe, but logic without courage leads to a galaxy where no one helps anyone, where everyone just watches while others die. After Vexstar left, Parker turned to Lisa. Think we made an enemy? Think we already had one? We just didn't know it yet. The human fleet began gathering at Earth. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. 200 ships of various sizes and types, 30,000 Marines and soldiers. Support ships carrying food, medical supplies, and spare parts. Lieutenant Commander Ryan. Cole stood on the bridge of his destroyer Swift Arrow and looked out at the assembled fleet. Next to him, his tactical officer, Lieutenant Kevin Walsh, was running calculations. Sir Kevin said, I've been looking at the intelligence reports on the Devourers. Their smallest ships have more firepower than our biggest battleships. Ryan nodded. I know. Their armor can withstand direct hits from weapons that could destroy a space station. I know. Their numbers are in the thousands. Be tens of thousands. Kevin, are you trying to scare me? Kevin looked up from his console. No, sir. I'm trying to understand why we're doing this. Ryan smiled. It's 30,000 Cathara. Children are going to die if we don't. The final briefing took place in the main hangar of Earth's primary space station. Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, stood before the assembled commanders. Behind him was a large screen showing what they knew about Devourer technology. I won't sugarcoat this, Jake said. We are outgunned, outnumbered, and outtouched. In every possible way. By all military logic, we should lose this fight before it starts. The commanders listened in silence. But here's what the Devourers don't know about humans, Jake continued. We don't fight by military logic. We fight by stubbornness. We fight by refusing to give up, even when giving up makes sense. Captain Nick Turner raised his hand. Sir, what's our actual strategy? Jake smiled. Our strategy is to be so unpredictable that the Devourers can't figure out what we're going to do next. While they're trying to understand us, we hit them with everything we have. And if that doesn't work, asked Captain Dan Miller, then we try something else. If that doesn't work, we try something else again. We keep trying until either we win or there are no more humans left to try. Dr. Amy Foster stood up. Admiral, my team has finished the new shield modifications. They're not much, but they should help. Every little bit helps, Jake replied. What about weapons? Major Alex Stone answered. Sir? We've loaded every ship. With as many Marines as possible, if we can get close enough to board their ships, we can fight them hand to hand. Several commanders looked shocked. Hand-to-hand combat in space was almost unheard of. That's insane, said Captain Susan Miller. Alex grinned. Ma'am, insane is our specialty. As the briefing ended, Jake looked out at the faces of his commanders. They were scared. They had every right to be. But they were also determined. Ready. To do something that everyone else said was impossible. The human fleet left Earth the next day. 200 ships carrying humanity's hopes and dreams toward a distant part of the galaxy where an ancient enemy waited. As they jumped to faster-than-light speed, Jake Morrison sat in his command chair and thought about the crystal being who had asked for help. They were coming. Yes. Against all odds, against all logic, against all reason, humanity was coming to answer the call. The journey to Cathara space took 3 weeks. For most of the human fleet, it was the longest they had ever been away from home. The ships traveled together in a tight formation, jumping from star system to star system through space that had never seen human vessels before. Captain Chris Taylor commanded the scout ship Eagle Eye. His job was to fly ahead of the main fleet and watch for danger. On the 10th day of their journey, he found something that made his blood run cold. Admiral Morrison, Chris said over the communication link. You need to see this. Jake Morrison appeared on the screen, looking tired. 3 weeks of command had aged him. What is it, Chris? Refugee ships, sir. Hundreds of them. The main fleet caught up with Chris an hour later. Spread across space were vessels from dozens of different species. Some were military ships, their hulls scarred from battle. Others were civilian transports, packed with families. All of them were running from the same thing. Jake ordered the fleet to stop. Within hours, representatives from the refugee ships were aboard the human flagship Terra's Pride. The meeting room was filled with aliens Jake had never seen before. There was Commander Thekfar of the Montari, a species that looked like giant insects. His ship had been part of a battle fleet that tried to stop the Devourers 2 months ago. Only his ship had survived. They came out of hyperspace like a storm, Thekfar said, his voice clicking and buzzing. Our weapons barely scratched their hulls. Our weapons turned our ships into dust. Captain Zelana was from the Harani people. She had been transporting civilians when the Devourers attacked her home system. They don't just destroy military targets, she said, her blue skin flickering with patterns of fear. They consume everything. Planets, moons, asteroids. They leave nothing behind but empty space. Elder Mordeth represented the Voxian Republic. His people were known throughout the galaxy for their military strength. Even they had been defeated. We threw everything we had at them, he said, his deep voice filled with shame. Our best ships, our greatest warriors, our most advanced weapons, it made no difference. Jake listened to story after story. Each one was the same. Overwhelming power. Complete defeat. Total destruction. By the time the meeting ended, he wondered if bringing his fleet had been the right choice. Dr. Lisa Hayes found him later, staring out at the stars from his quarters. Second thoughts? She asked. Third and fourth thoughts, Jake replied. Lisa, Every species we've talked to is more advanced than us. They all had better weapons, better ships, better everything. And they all lost. Lisa sat down next to him. That's the problem. What do you mean? All those species fought the way they thought they should fight? They used proper tactics, followed military doctrine, did everything by the book? What if the book is wrong? Before Jake could answer, an alarm sounded throughout the ship. Jake and Lisa rushed to the bridge, where Lieutenant Amy Foster was working frantically at her console. "What's happening?" Jake demanded.
Yes, sir.
"We're detecting Cathara energy signatures," Amy said.
Yes.
"It's a small group of ships, badly damaged. The Cathara vessels look like floating crystals, beautiful, but clearly hurt. Their hulls were cracked, their lights dim. When they docked with the human flagship, Elder Zixtala himself came aboard. Jake had seen the Elder's image in the transmission, but meeting him in person was different. Zixtala was tall and thin, his crystal body filled with swirling lights. That moved like liquid starlight. But those lights were dim now, flickering with exhaustion and grief. "You came," Zixtala said, his musical voice barely above a whisper. "We did not dare hope, but you came. We said we would," Jake replied simply. Zixtala's lights brightened slightly. "Admiral Morrison, I must show you what we face. Perhaps then you will understand why so many others have turned away." The Elder led them to the ship's main conference room, where he activated a crystal device. Holographic images filled the air, showing the Devourer fleet in all its terrible glory. The ships were massive, each one the size of a small city. Their hulls were dark metal that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved in perfect formation, like parts of a single giant machine. And there were thousands of them. "This is just one of their battle groups," Ixtala explained. "They have dozens more scattered across our space." The Captain Nick Turner, who had joined them for the briefing, whistled low. "Those ships are enormous. Their smallest vessels are larger than your biggest battleships," Zixtala said. "Their weapons can destroy entire moons. Their shields can withstand the energy output of a star." Jake studied the images carefully. The Devourer ships looked invincible, but something bothered him about their formation. "Elder, they move in perfect patterns." "Yes, they are machines, not living beings. They calculate the most efficient way to do everything."
Dr. Rachel Kim.
The fleet's tactical expert was taking notes. "Do they ever break from these patterns?" "Never. Efficiency is everything to them." Rachel looked up at Jake. "Sir, that might be important." Later that night, Jake called a meeting of his senior commanders. The conference room was crowded with captains, marines, and scientists. The holographic display still showed the Devourer fleet. "All right, people," Jake said. "You've seen what we're up against. Anyone want to go home?" No one moved. "Major Alex Stone spoke for all of them, sir. We came here to do a job." "Let's do it." Jake smiled. "That's what I wanted to hear. Rachel, what did you figure out from the Kithara data?" Rachel stood up, pointing at the holographic ships. "The Devourers are incredibly advanced, but they have a weakness. They think like machines. They calculate odds, follow patterns, and choose the most efficient solution to every problem." "How is that a weakness?" asked Captain Dan Miller. "Because humans don't think like machines," Rachel replied. "We do things that don't make mathematical sense. We take risks that seem stupid. We make choices based on emotion instead of logic." "Captain," Chris Taylor leaned forward. "Are you saying we should fight crazy?" "I'm saying we should fight human." Dr. Amy Foster had been working on her tablet during the discussion. She looked up with excitement. "I think I know how we can use this." Amy activated the room's display system, showing technical diagrams of Devourer ships. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and physical projectiles. But they're calibrated for predictable attack patterns. "What are you thinking?" Jake asked. "What if we don't attack predictably? What if we do things that no sane military force would do?" Major Alex Stone grinned, "Like ramming their ships. It's like using our ships as weapons," Amy agreed. "Like overloading our reactors and turning them into bombs. Like fighting them at ranges so close that their big guns can't target us." The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. What Amy was suggesting violated every principle of space combat. It was dangerous, desperate, probably suicidal. It was also completely human, Jake looked around the room at his commanders. Everyone understand what we're talking about here? We're going to fight the most advanced enemy in the galaxy by throwing out everything we know about warfare and making it up as we go. Captain Nick Turner nodded. Sir, that sounds about right for humans. The meeting continued for hours as they planned their impossible mission. They would divide the fleet into small groups that could move independently. Each group would attack differently, making it impossible for the Devourers to predict what they would do next. Some ships would fight at long range, using hit-and-run tactics. Others would close to point-blank range for boarding actions. Others would serve as decoys, drawing fire while the real attacks came from unexpected directions. It was chaos theory applied to military strategy. It was madness disguised as a battle plan. It was the most human thing they could do. As the meeting ended, Lazikstala approached Jake. Admiral, I have listened to your plans. I do not understand them. That's the point, Jake replied. You don't understand them. The Devourers won't either. The Elder's crystal body flickered with what might have been amusement. You know, when we sent that message asking for help, we hoped someone would answer, but we never imagined anyone like you. Jake smiled. Elder, you asked for help from a death world. What did you expect? The next morning, the human fleet entered Kythera space. Ahead of them waited an enemy that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Behind them was the hope of every refugee, every survivor, every being that had been told to give up and accept defeat. The Devourers were about to learn why humans were different from every other species in the galaxy. They were about to discover what happened when you threatened something a human cared about. They were about to find out what Deathworld really meant. The Kythera homeworld hung in space like a giant crystal, its surface covered with cities that sparkled in the light of 3 suns. It was beautiful, ancient, and doomed. Around it, the Devourer fleet waited like a pack of metal wolves. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship and counted the enemy ships. 1,047 vessels, each one massive and deadly. His own fleet had been reduced to 160 ships during the journey through Devourer space. They were outnumbered 6-1 by an enemy with superior technology. Yes, sir, said Lieutenant Amy Foster from her position at the communications. Consul, we're receiving a transmission from the Devourer command ship. Jake nodded. Put it on screen. The image that appeared was not what anyone expected. Instead of a machine or alien creature, they saw what looked like a perfect human face. But the eyes were empty, cold, and completely without emotion. Human vessels, the face said in a voice that sounded like metal scraping against stone. AM Command Unit 1 of the Devourer Collective. You will withdraw from this system immediately. Jake stepped forward. This is Admiral Morrison of the Terran Defense Force. We're here to protect the Kythera people. The Kythera will be processed. Their world will be consumed. This is inevitable. Your interference serves no logical purpose. Maybe not, Jake replied. But we're going to interfere anyway. The Devourer's perfect face showed no expression. Your ships are inferior. Your numbers are insufficient. Your defeat is mathematically certain. Withdraw now, and you will be permitted to leave. Jake looked around his bridge at his crew. They were scared, but they were ready. Command Unit 1, let me explain something about humans. We specialize in doing things that are mathematically impossible. The transmission ended. Within minutes, the Devourer fleet began moving into attack formation. Their ships moved with mechanical precision, each one taking its assigned position in a pattern that would maximize their firepower while minimizing their vulnerability. All ships, Jake announced over the fleet communication system. Remember? The plan: hit hard, hit fast, and hit weird. Make them wonder what the hell we're thinking. The battle began when Captain Chris Taylor's scout group attacked the Devourer left flank. Instead of engaging at long range as military doctrine demanded, the small human ships flew straight at the enemy vessels, their engines pushed to maximum power. The Devourers opened fire with weapons that could destroy entire cities. But the human ships were moving too fast and too erratically for the massive guns to track. Chris led his squadron between the giant enemy vessels, firing at point-blank range at their weapon systems. This is insane. shouted his tactical officer, Lieutenant Kevin Walsh, as their ship shook under enemy fire. "That's the idea," Chris replied, steering his ship under the hull of a Devourer battleship and launching all his missiles at once. On the other side of the battlefield, Captain Nick Turner was trying something even crazier. His heavy cruiser Defiant was ramming Devourer. "Ships, engineering, give me everything you've got," Nick ordered, as his ship approached, an enemy destroyer. "Sir, if we hit them at this speed, we'll both be destroyed."
Ow.
His chief engineer, Emma Clark, replied from the engine room. "That's the plan." The Defiant struck the Devourer ship amidships, both vessels exploding in a ball of fire that lit up space for thousands of kilometers. But Nick and his crew had evacuated to escape pods seconds before impact, and the explosion took out 2 more enemy ships that had been flying in formation. Major Alex Stone was leading the most desperate part of the attack. His Marines were actually boarding Devourer's ships. The plan was simple and completely insane. Fast attack ships would ram the enemy vessels just hard enough to punch holes in their hulls without destroying both ships. Then Marines in spacesuits would board through the holes and fight the Devourers hand-to-hand. Alex led the first boarding party onto a Devourer command ship. The inside was filled with corridors that looked more like the inside of a machine than a spacecraft. The Devourers themselves were humanoid robots, each one identical and equipped with energy weapons. "Remember," Alex told his Marines over the radio, "these things think like computers, do things they won't expect." The first group of Devourers they encountered tried to form a perfect defensive line across a corridor. Instead of attacking the line directly, the Marines used explosive charges to blow holes in the walls and ceiling, attacking from 6 directions at once. The robots couldn't adapt fast enough. Their programming told them to fight efficiently, but the Marines weren't fighting efficiently. They were fighting like humans from a death world, using every dirty trick they could think of. Back on the main battlefield, the tide was slowly turning. The human fleet was taking heavy losses, but they were causing chaos in the Devourer formation. Ships that had operated with machine precision for thousands of years suddenly couldn't predict what their enemies would do next. Dr. Amy Foster had been working frantically in her laboratory during the battle. The new shield technology she had developed was helping, but she had discovered something even more important. Admiral. She called Jake over the communication system. "I've found their weakness." "What is it?" "They're networked. All the Devourer ships share information instantly. That's how they coordinate so perfectly. But it's also how we can hurt them." Amy had developed a computer virus that could spread through the Devourer network, but to install it, someone would have to get close to their command ship and physically connect to their systems. "That's a suicide mission," Jake said when she explained the plan. "Sir," said Lieutenant Kevin Walsh, who had survived the destruction of his scout ship and was now on the flagship. "I'll do it." Jake looked at the young officer. Kevin was barely 25 years old, with his whole life ahead of him. "Son, you know you won't come back from this." Kevin nodded. "Admiral, my grandfather died fighting in the colony wars. My father died defending Earth during the Zalani crisis. Dying for something important is what my family does." Within an hour, Kevin was flying a small fighter craft toward the Devourer command ship. The massive vessel was surrounded by defensive fire that would have stopped any normal attack. Kevin wasn't flying normally. He spun his ship through impossible maneuvers, diving and climbing and rolling in patterns that no sane pilot would attempt. The Devourer gunners couldn't track him because his movements made no tactical sense. Kevin reached the command ship and crashed his fighter directly into their main communication array. As his ship exploded, the virus Amy had created spread through the Devourer network like wildfire. The effect was immediate and devastating. Devourer ships began firing on each other as their targeting systems became confused. Their perfect formations broke apart as individual vessels lost contact with their commanders, but the battle was far from over. Even damaged and confused, the Devourers still outnumbered the humans 3-1. That's when the impossible happened. New ships began appearing at the edge of the system. First came the Kraken war fleet, their ships black as space and armed with weapons that could crack planets. Then came the Viridian Exploration Force, their vessels gleaming silver and equipped with technology that seemed like magic. Finally, even the proud Zelani arrived, led by High Minister Vexstar himself. Jake opened a communication channel to the new arrivals. "This is Admiral Morrison." "What are you doing here, Vexstar?" His cold voice came back immediately. "Admiral, we have been monitoring your battle. We find ourselves... impressed enough to help. Your species has done something we thought impossible. You have made the Devourers predictably unpredictable. For the first time in centuries, these machines are confused. For the first time in centuries, they can be defeated." The combined fleet struck the Devourers like a hammer blow. Human ships continued their chaotic attacks, while the other species used their advanced weapons to exploit the confusion. Kevin's virus had created. The battle raged for 18 hours. When it finally ended, the space around the Kythera homeworld was filled with the wreckage of both fleets. The Devourers had been defeated, but the cost had been enormous. Jake stood on his bridge and looked out at what remained of his fleet. Of the 160 ships that had entered the battle, only 53 were still functional. 15,000 humans were dead or missing, including brave souls like Kevin Walsh, who had given everything for victory, but they had won. Against all odds, against all logic, against all reason, it won. Captain Lisa Hayes approached Jake, her uniform torn and her face streaked with smoke. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth." The screen lit up with the image of Admiral Ben Parker calling from Earth Command. Behind him, Jake could see celebration in the background. People cheering, flags waving, tears of joy and relief. "Jake," Parker said, his voice thick with emotion, "the whole galaxy knows what you did here. You didn't just save the Kythera. You proved that the Devourers could be beaten." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of exhaustion settling over him. "What's our status, sir?" "Son, you're heroes. All of you. The Galactic Council has called an emergency session. Every species that refused to help is now asking how they can join the fight against any remaining Devourer forces." Through his bridge window, Jake could see Kythera ships approaching. Their crystal hulls were damaged, but still beautiful, still singing their musical harmonies across space. Soon, representatives from the grateful species would come aboard too, thank the humans who had answered their desperate call. But for now, Jake Morrison stood on his bridge and watched the stars, thinking about the young pilot who had flown into death to save billions of lives, and about all the other humans who had shown the galaxy what it really meant to answer when someone called for help. The battle was over. The war was won. And humanity had proven once again that sometimes the impossible was just another word for human. 3 months after the battle, Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the crystal gardens of the Kythera homeworld. The air was filled with music. The natural song that the Kythera buildings made when the wind passed through them was beautiful, but Jake barely heard it. His mind was still on the friends he had lost. Elder Zixtala approached, walking slowly across the crystal paths. The Elder's body was brighter now than it had been during the war, but Jake could see new patterns in the light, memories of loss and gratitude mixed together. "Admiral Morrison," Zixtala said in his musical voice, "you seem troubled." Jake looked up at the alien leader. "Keep thinking about Kevin Walsh, about Chris Taylor, about all the people who didn't make it home." Zixtala was quiet for a moment. Then he began to glow more brightly, and Jake heard something new in the crystal song around them, a harmony that spoke of heroes and sacrifice and memories that would never fade. "Among my people," Zixtala said, "we have a concept that does not translate well into your language. It means those who answer when others cannot. We have decided to call your species by this name," the answer Jake said, quietly double quotes. "Yes, you heard our call when all the galaxy had turned away. You came when no one else would come. You fought when no one else would fight. You answered." They walked together toward the memorial that the Kythera had built. It was a crystal spire that reached toward the sky, inscribed with the names of every human who had died in the battle. The crystal sang their names in harmonies that would play for 1,000 years. Jake's communication device buzzed. Captain Lisa Hayes was calling from orbit. "Admiral, we have visitors." An hour later, Jake was back aboard his flagship, sitting in a conference room filled with representatives from across the galaxy. High Minister Vexstar was there, looking uncomfortable. General Kekstar of the Kraken military sat beside Commander Yilseth of the Viridian fleet, but the most important visitor was Counselor Prime Zelenor, the leader of the entire Galactic Council. She was an ancient being from a species so old that no one remembered their original name. She looked at Jake with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. "Admiral Morrison," she said in a voice like distant thunder, "the Council has voted. Humanity is hereby granted a permanent seat on the Galactic Council, with full voting rights and military authority." Jake nodded. "Thank you, Counselor." "We're honored." "More than that," Vexter added, still looking uncomfortable. "We are establishing new military protocols based on human tactical doctrine. We are calling it the Terran Doctrine." "What exactly does that mean?" asked Captain Nick Turner, who had survived the battle despite ramming 3 enemy ships. General Kekstar answered, "It means we are learning to fight like humans, to be unpredictable, to do things that don't make sense to a machine mind." Amy Foster, now promoted to Chief of Xenological Research, looked up from her tablet. "The implications go beyond military tactics. Human psychology is fundamentally different from other species. We make decisions based on emotion and instinct in ways that others find impossible to understand. Is that good or bad?" It's Major Alex Stone. Amy smiled. "It's human. Apparently the galaxy needs more of that." The meeting continued for hours as they discussed the new alliance that was forming. Species that had never worked together were now sharing technology and tactics. The Kraken were teaching humans about advanced weapons. The Viridians were sharing their knowledge of space-time manipulation. The humans were teaching everyone else how to think outside the box, but the most important development was the creation of the Terran Response Corps. "The concept is simple," explained Counselor Prime Zelenor. "When other civilizations face threats they cannot handle, when diplomatic solutions fail, when all hope seems lost, they call the response corps." Jake looked around the room at his fellow humans, and we answer, "Always," Zelenor confirmed. "That is what humans do." The first response corps mission came 2 weeks later. A species called the Tyranni, living near the galaxy's edge, sent a desperate message. Their star was dying prematurely, poisoned by an unknown force. It had maybe 6 months before their entire solar system became uninhabitable. Other species had tried to help. The Viridians had sent scientists. Zelani had offered to relocate the Tyranni population. But nothing was working. Captain Dan Miller, now commanding a purpose-built response corps vessel, led the mission. His ship was smaller than the old military cruisers, but it was designed for exactly this kind of impossible task. "So, what's the plan?" asked his chief engineer, Sophie Baker. As they approached the dying star, Don smiled. "We're going to relight a star? That's impossible. Sophie, when has that ever stopped us?" The mission took 3 months of dangerous work inside the star's corona. Human engineers worked alongside alien scientists, combining human stubbornness with advanced technology. They couldn't save the star, but they managed to stabilize it long enough to evacuate the entire Tyranni civilization to a new home. The Tyranni Elder, a being of living flame, spoke to Dan before they parted. "Why did you risk so much for people you had never met?" Dan's answer became the unofficial motto of the response corps because someone asked for help. Back on Earth, Jake Morrison had been promoted again. He was now director of the Terran Response Corps, coordinating missions across the galaxy. His office was filled with messages from species asking for help with problems that seemed impossible to solve. There was a request from the Aquatic Collective whose ocean worlds were being poisoned by space pirates. The fungal network needed help with a plague that was destroying their hive minds. The Silicon Brothers had discovered something ancient and dangerous buried in their homeworlds. Core. Each message was marked with the same classification. Impossible. Requires human response. Jake's assistant, Lieutenant Emma Clark, brought him the daily reports. "Sir, we have 17 new requests this week." Everything from stopping a rogue AI to preventing 2 star systems from going to war. Jake looked out his window at the Earth below. It was peaceful now, blue and green and beautiful. But he knew that across the galaxy, there were people in trouble. People who needed help that no one else would give. Emma, start putting together response teams. Looks like we're going to be busy, sir. Are you sure we can handle all of these? Some of these problems seem genuinely impossible. Jake smiled and thought about Kevin Walsh, who had flown into certain death to save billions of lives. He thought about Chris Taylor, who had led a charge against impossible odds. Thought about all the humans who had looked at the word impossible and decided it was just another challenge to overcome. Emma, let me tell you something about humans. We specialize in impossible. 6 months later, Jake received a message that made him smile. It was from a young Cathara named Zillan, writing on behalf of her school class. Dear Admiral Morrison, the message read, we are learning about the great battle where humans saved our world. Our teacher says that before you came, everyone thought the Devourers were unstoppable. But humans didn't care what everyone thought. Humans just cared about helping people who needed help. We want to be like humans when we grow up. Is that possible? Jake sent back a simple reply. Being human isn't about what species you are. It's about answering when someone calls for help. It's about doing what's right even when it's hard. It's about never giving up on people who need you.
Yes, you can.
Be like humans. The galaxy needs more of that. That evening, Jake stood on his balcony and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, response corps teams were working on problems that other species had given up on. Human ships were carrying hope to places where hope had been forgotten. His communication device buzzed with a new emergency signal. Another impossible situation. Another call for help from someone who had nowhere else to turn. Jake Morrison, former commander of an orbital defense station, current director of the Terran Response Corps, smiled and reached for his communicator. This is Admiral Morrison, he said. We're on our way, because that's what humans did. When aliens cried out, Deathworlders answered with everything they had, every time, without fail, without question, always. The stars waited, and somewhere among them, someone needed help. As long as there were humans in the galaxy, that call would never go unanswered.